Okay, so I asked you the question, what do fatty acids make? Meaning, what are they the monomers of? And hopefully you guys told me, yep, lipids. Good job. Okay? So we know fatty acids are the monomers of lipids, not polymers. Polymers are, well, we have 4 types of polymers we're talking about, right? Nucleic acids, proteins, lipids, and carbohydrates. But lipids are a category of those. Let me ask you another question. How about this? What are the monomers of carbohydrates? What are the monomers of carbohydrates from yesterday? Come on, pair deckers, let's go. Don't look it up. Take a guess. It's okay to be wrong. What are the monomers of carbohydrates? I don't remember what I asked. Only 3 of you. Come on. Don't worry about looking it up. Just go off the top of your head. I know. What are the monomers of carbohydrates? What are the monomers of carbohydrates? Get logged into Pear Deck with this thing. Let's go. You got it out. Might as well use it. peardeck.com/join. Come on, 9 of you. Let's see what we're coming up with. Sugar? No. Yes, carbohydrates are carbon and water. No, not fatty acids. That's a tough one, I know. Everybody say monosaccharide. Right? Remember, the monomers of carbohydrates are monosaccharides. 2 monosaccharides together are a disaccharide. Any more than that is a polysaccharide. Okay? All right. So today we're going to talk about proteins and nucleic acids. Folks, if you're not on Pear Deck, get there, please. I'm going to start counting how many people are logged in. In fact, I'm going to take a look right now, just so I have an idea to see how many I should see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. So I should see 18 responses each time, minimum. All right? So proteins are chains of amino acids that twist and fold into certain shapes that determine what the proteins do. So based on that statement right there, just that sentence alone, I want you guys to tell me what the monomers of proteins are. Based on that first statement, what are the monomers of proteins? What are the monomers of proteins? Based on what you just read, what are the monomers of proteins? Yes. Monomers are the simpler parts of the large biomolecules that are polymers. So they're the single subunits of our larger biomolecules. What are, based on that sentence, the monomers of proteins? Should have 18 responses very shortly. I don't know if shortly can be used like that, but we just used it. Folks, I have 18 of you. Be wrong. Take a shot. 5, 4, 3, okay. 2, 1. Let's see what we ended up with. Fatty acids, no. That's the fatty acids are for lipids. Amino acids for sure. Very good. So if you take a look at what that statement says, proteins are chains of amino acids. That means they're made of amino acids, right? So amino acids are our monomers in our protein world. So there are many types of proteins that perform many types of functions, and that does include structure, support, movement, communication, transportation, carrying out chemical reactions. Is there anything left after that? Everybody say not much, right? So proteins pretty much do everything. Let me put that into perspective. You have over 30,000 different proteins that make you, you. That's a lot. A lot of different types of proteins. They all serve a completely different function, and they all have a completely different structure. They perhaps are the only reason that we eat food and function. Okay, we're trying to make more proteins on a daily basis. That's essentially what I'm trying to tell you here. All of those other biomolecules, lipids, carbohydrates, even DNA is involved in making a protein. So they're made of these small parts called amino acids. Those are the building blocks that link together to form proteins. Let me show you what that kind of looks like. I'm not the best drawer, but I'll give it a shot. Uh-oh. Yeah, there are diagrams too. But I like to draw it out because it forces you guys to draw it out with me, and then you learn something instead of just glancing at a picture, right? Yeah. So I want everybody to draw when I write. Each amino acid will have a central carbon. So I'm about to draw one amino acid. And we know carbon likes to bond 4 times, right? One part of an amino acid is called an amino group. It's what it's named after, obviously, right? So this is the amino group. Then there's a hydrogen hanging off here. That doesn't have a special name. This is called the central carbon. And then off to the right is what is known as the carboxyl group. It's COOH. Carboxyl. Carboxylic acid, technical term. If you put carboxyl in water, it becomes an acid. Okay. And then we have the R group, which is on the top. It's a terrible R. What is R in the periodic table? Everybody take a look. What is R? Somebody help me out. What is it? Radon? No. No, that's RN. I know. Anybody find R on there anywhere? It's not on there. It's not there. So R is not on the periodic table. That's why we call it. That's why they label it R often. So an R group is what is called a functional group. And we will change the functional group. Front right, Courtney, you can take the test up there. So that R group, the functional group, will change. If I change the R group, it changes the amino acid that I am. So if I told you that there's 20 different functional groups, you would know that there's 20 different amino acids, right? That's what there is. So there's 20 different amino acids. And they make up all of our proteins. They make up any protein on the planet. That means plants are made of the same amino acids that we are. We just put ours together in a different order. Does that make sense? How about this one? I have brown eyes. Who has blue eyes? Okay, we got a few blue-eyed people. I have brown eyes. You and I have a different protein. That means our amino acids are in a different order. So let's say we each have about 1,000 amino acids. We just put them in a different order, and they make a different protein. Yours reflects blue light. Mine reflects a few different ones and gives you brown. Okay? It's the only difference. So this functional group is pretty important. You guys have heard of your essential amino acids, right? You guys heard of those? You have to eat your essential amino acids in your diet, or you can't make your own what? Proteins, right? So what do? You eat food. Who eats cow? Anybody like cow? I like some cow every now and then. All right. So you eat cow. You break down cow. It's high in protein. You break the cow's proteins down into amino acids, and then you build your own proteins out of those amino acids. It's that simple. I mean, it's not that simple, but it is really, when it comes down to it. We take their biomolecules, break them down into their monomers, and then we make our polymers with their monomers. You guys will never think about eating the same, will you? So every amino acid has an amino group and a carboxyl group. We just talked about that. Units of amino acids can form links called peptide bonds. Oh, shoot. There's another bond. So now we've talked about covalent, ionic, polar covalent, hydrogen, and now another one, a peptide bond. All you have to know about a peptide bond, though, is that it is the bond that holds together amino acids. That's it, okay? Simple. No special rules with ionic and covalent. It's actually a type of covalent bond. So the side group gives the amino acid its unique property. I told you the side group is called what? The R group, right? The functional R group. And since there's 20 different R groups. And finally, what happens once I bring them together? Well, we talked about my eyes. And we talked about, Mason, what color are your eyes? Blue? Okay, you got blue, I got brown. That'll work. So you and I, we have a different primary structure. That means we have a different order of our amino acids. So the first structure of a protein is called the primary structure. And that, simply put, is the order that our amino acids are in for that particular protein. And then something happens. Imagine I have a string of amino acids. Just imagine it's like a necklace, okay? Like, let's say a string of pearls or whatever. And let's say they're magnetic beads. If I put them down on the table, will those magnetic beads, some of them be attracted to each other? Yeah, and then some of them will be repelled as well. So that's the hydrogen bonding that takes place. And that is what creates the secondary structure. Very weak hydrogen bonds to the neighboring molecule. The third thing that happens is some of those R groups, those functional groups, will actually form stronger bonds with each other. Some of them are sulfide bonds, some are covalent bonds, but they'll actually form these permanent bonds to each other. It's almost like they fold again and become permanently bound in a structure. And at the tertiary structure, I can actually be a protein here. Okay, so I can have a protein at the tertiary structure. Sometimes there's two of these structures that come together. And so that's if I have two different, what are called polypeptides that come together to form a functional group, a protein together. So I've given you a lot of information there. What's the bond that holds amino acids together? Peptide bond. If I bring many monomers together, they're called polymers, right? So if I put a bunch of amino acids together, we call it a polypeptide. Everybody say polypeptide. If I put just two amino acids together, it's called a dipeptide. Say dipeptide. Okay. Say this with me. All proteins are polypeptides. But not all polypeptides are proteins. That means I can be an assembly of amino acids, but not a protein. Okay? So I can be a string of pearls and not be a necklace, right? You get that? So if I function, I am then a protein. You can function as a single polypeptide protein, or you can function as two coming together to form a larger unit, doing a very special job. We have a lot of these in our body. We're pretty complex. So there's three different levels of organization of a protein. You have to know them. So if I give you a question that says the order of amino acids and the folding, you're looking at the secondary structure. If I tell you that they form bonds between the side chains, the functional groups, you're at your tertiary level. And if I say there's two polypeptides coming together, I'm at my quaternary level. All right? How do we get the information to get that first structure right here? Where does this come from, the order of amino acids? It's a very special molecule to us. Who has the master plan on how to make an amino acid or a protein? What? Not carbon, no. It's a molecule. We talk about it a lot in like forensic science or used as evidence sometimes in court cases. DNA. So we're going to do something together real quick because this might be the most important thing we do together all year is talk about this very simple idea because we're about to talk about nucleic acids, which is DNA. So DNA is a pretty big molecule. Where do you find DNA? Can anybody tell me? It's what chromosomes are made of, but where do we find it in the cell? Yes? The nucleus, I heard it. Okay? So DNA is inside of this nucleus. Does it look like it can fit through this nuclear pore? Really? Wait, how about that one? Can it fit through there? No, DNA is too big. So DNA will never leave the nucleus unless something goes terribly wrong with your cell. So these are nuclear pores. And because DNA is too big, it has to be copied onto a smaller structure called RNA. And RNA can fit through a nuclear pore out into what's known as the cytoplasm. Because remember, we're in this cell, right? Where the cell are we? Exactly. All right. They go out and then they find this structure called the ribosome. We're going to talk more about this in later chapters, but I like to plant this seed for then. And ribosomes do something very special. They make proteins. So, I do what's called choral response with this. What are proteins made of? Amino acids. We're going to all do this together. Inside of the nucleus, we find what? Everybody say DNA. Everybody say DNA. We copy DNA onto? Everybody say RNA. RNA wiggles through a, say nuclear pore. Everybody say nuclear pore. It goes out into the, to find a, everybody say ribosome. To make a, by assembling, everybody say amino acids. Now we're going to do it together, a little more enthusiasm. It's homecoming week. Inside of the nucleus, we have a large structure called DNA. We copy DNA onto RNA. RNA wiggles through a, to go out into the, to find a, to make a, by assembling amino acids. Everybody say amino acids. We're going to do it without this in a minute. Inside of a nucleus, we find a large biomolecule called DNA. We copy DNA onto a smaller structure called RNA. RNA wiggles through a, everybody say nuclear pore. Nuclear pore. Nuclear pore. Okay? RNA wiggles through a, RNA wiggles through a, goes out into the, to find a ribosome. RNA wiggles through a, to go out into the, to find a, to make a, to assemble. All right, let's see if you did. Let's try this. Inside of the nucleus, we have a large structure called DNA. DNA copies itself onto RNA. RNA wiggles through a, to go out into the, to find a, to assemble. By assembling, I tricked you there, didn't I? Sorry about that. You guys got it. Okay. That was just mean and heartless. Okay? All right. That will happen throughout the year. I will keep adding to that. Ask Courtney. She'll tell you all about it. It becomes very arduous eventually. All right, so we're talking about nucleic acids right now, which is indeed DNA and RNA. So a nucleic acid is a long chain of nucleotide units. Based on that first statement, what are the monomers of nucleic acids? What are the monomers? I don't care. What are the monomers of nucleic acids? What are the monomers of nucleic acids? I will go back to that screen momentarily. What are the monomers of nucleic acids? Tippity tap it in. Who? No, because I'll come back to that. I asked him to do something else right then. I'll come back to that screen. He can finish writing in a minute. Let's see what we came up with. I care. I guess that was a bad choice of words.
Yeah, kind of.
I care. At that moment, I had something more important. I'm working. I will never get there. I'll tell you right now. I'm going to make it an hour. So the nucleotides is the correct answer, right? Nucleotides are those monomers of, I don't know where proteins came from, because it was out of that sentence I just had on the board, right? Let's hop back to it. Nucleic acid is a long chain of nucleotide subunits. Therefore, nucleotides are the monomers of nucleic acids. Nucleic acids are the polymers in the nucleic acid world. All right. So a nucleotide is a molecule made up of 3 parts. It's a sugar, a base, and a phosphate group. And nucleotides of deoxyribonucleic acid, or DNA, contain the sugar deoxyribose. So, and then if you look at RNA, it contains the sugar ribose for ribonucleic acid. So looking at both DNA and RNA, they're both named after the sugar that they're made of in their nucleotides. Let me show you what a nucleotide kind of looks like. So in every nucleotide, I'm going to have a phosphate group. I'm going to have a sugar. And then attached to that sugar, in the middle, I'm going to have a nitrogen base. And then, since DNA is double-stranded, on the other side, I'm going to have another nitrogen base, another sugar, and another phosphate group. This is one nucleotide of a nucleic acid. They all contain a sugar, a phosphate group, and a nitrogen base. If I'm double-stranded, I'm DNA. If I'm single-stranded, I'm RNA. We're going to spend a whole chapter, it's chapter 13, dealing with these. Okay, so I don't need to get into them too much. And in fact, we've already just talked about protein synthesis, which we will cover in a later chapter, but I like to kind of plant that little brainwashing verbal choral response before we get there, because I'll come back to that time and time again. But the middle of DNA is held together by what type of bond? What does that look like? Very good. Hydrogen bond. Dotted line is hydrogen bond. Okay. The sides are held together by what type of bond? Covalent bond. Courtney, are you coming back? Yeah, I can't have you start and finish. You can't start and stop on that one. Okay. All right. So, yes. Yeah, go ahead. Take the passing on. So the side of DNA, let's just keep going down one side of DNA. Okay? And I'll add another one, another nitrogen group, to another nitrogen group. And this just keeps going down the sides of DNA. Let me give you an idea of what I mean by keeps going. You have 2.2 billion of these in your DNA. 2.2 billion pairs. That means this bonding happens 2.2 billion times. And every one of your cells has a duplicated copy of that. Well, most of them. So you got a lot of DNA in you, right? Yes? Yeah, we'll extract our own DNA. I did that actually the other day with biotech. We'll do it in here too. Yep. So the monomers of nucleic acids are nucleotides. And there's 2 basic types. There's DNA and RNA nucleotides. There's another one we're going to talk about too today, also today. So nucleotides, again, are those monomers of both DNA and RNA. DNA is named after its sugar deoxyribose, RNA after ribose. Uh-oh. There we go. So DNA carries or acts as instructions for the process of an organism's life. And when I say process, I mean it has the directions on how to make a protein. Because we all know you copy DNA onto, oh, I lost you. Inside of the nucleus, you have a large molecule called, what do we have there? Stop. Everybody. Inside of the nucleus, we have a large biomolecule called DNA. We copy DNA onto RNA wiggles through a nuclear pore and goes out into the cytoplasm to find a ribosome to make a protein by assembling amino acids. Okay, so the instructions they start in DNA. Would you ever want your master copy to get out of the nucleus? No, and so it's kept safe there. We just take copies of it onto RNA. So DNA consists of two strands of nucleotides that spiral around each other, and RNA also interacts with DNA to help decode the information. How? We copy DNA onto RNA. We talked about that. And then nucleic acids, they store and transmit hereditary information. So DNA transmits its message to RNA. RNA takes that message to the ribosome, and then you make a protein. And then I get brown eyes. If I don't have that protein, I get white hair, right? Yes?
Is it possible for parents to have, like, blue eyes and then their kid to have, like, green or brown eyes?
Not brown, but green, yes. Yeah.
Why not brown?
Because brown is dominant. If brown's present, it will always show up, like mine. Like I have two blue-eyed daughters. My wife has blue eyes. We're going to talk about this in genetics. So you can never have a brown-eyed child from two true blue-eyed parents. Now careful, because hazel eyes are different. Eye color is polygenic. You can never straight up just determine what your child will be because it contains more than one gene. I cannot teach genetics right now, that's chapter 12. But we will answer all of these questions later. Yes? Actually, blue eyes is really rare. We live in Bay City, which is a Polish community, though, which happens to have like German descent. So we have more blue-eyed people in this area. You go to other parts of the world, usually brown eyes are dominant and show up more often. Oh, let the phone ring. If it's important, If it's important, they'll call back again. All right. So looking at another type of nucleotide, these are energy carriers. It's called ATP. You guys ever heard of ATP? It's what the Native Americans live in. Right? Yeah. No? Nobody liked that one. Shoot. Halloween's coming up, you see you see ATP here and ATP there because it's, TP time. You find it in the bathroom too. That's another topic for another class. So I got to get all the TP jokes out before I start talking about it. So some single nucleotides have other important roles. Adenosine triphosphate, or ATP, is a nucleotide that has 3 phosphate groups, hence the tri. It stands for adenosine triphosphate. Phosphate groups and supplies energy to cells. There's a lot of energy in ATP. Takes a lot of energy to make ATP. You got to cut down the tree, right? Kill the buffalo for its hide. Wrap it around. Okay. All right, no more ATP jokes. I can't. Every time I say ATP, I see a TP in my head. So energy is released in the reaction that breaks off the 3rd phosphate group. I'll show you that in a minute. But other single nucleotides transfer electrons or hydrogen atoms for other life processes. We're going to talk about that in chapter 9. But for this chapter, you have to understand that adenosine triphosphate, otherwise known as ATP, looks conceptually something like this. And this is kind of a model of ATP, but what happens in your body in a very simple, idealistic drawing here is we break one of these bonds. These squiggly bonds, I'm going to give you another name for them, I'm sorry. This is the last new bond I'll give you. This is called a high energy bond. And there's 2 of them in ATP. If I break that bond, I release energy, and this phosphate group is free now. Now I no longer have ATP, because this is ATP. I now have ADP. Stands for adenosine diphosphate. I can actually break another one off, but that rarely happens, so I'm not even going to talk about it. If I did break it off, though, it would become AMP, adenosine monophosphate. So if I asked you who has more potential energy, ATP or ADP, what would you tell me? ATP. This is spent energy down here, okay? And I can go back and forth between these two. So I eat my food. I break it down with oxygen. Anytime you bring something together with oxygen, it's like a fire, right? Breathe out, CO2, right? Combustion, fire. That's essentially what's going on inside of you. We'll talk more about that when we talk about respiration, and that's chapter 9. But basically what you're doing is you're taking the energy from the bonds in your food and you're transferring that into a bond between two phosphates. And then you get to use it like money throughout your body and spend it on different processes. Because every single one of your chemical reactions that require energy use ATP. Okay. Are we the only ones that use ATP, or does every other organism on the planet use it? Every other, including trees, right? Trees actually breathe the same way we do. They just make their food differently. But that's a chapter for another day. All right, quick summary. We talked about large, complex biomolecules that are built from a few smaller, simpler repeating units arranged in extremely precise ways. We start off with monomers, then we build polymers. Cells use carbohydrates for sources of energy, structural materials, and cellular identification. We talked about the monomers being monosaccharides, then 2 disaccharides, then our polymers are our polysaccharides. And the main functions of lipids, those are those steroids, those fats, those waxes, phospholipids. They're involved in storing energy and controlling water movement. The monomers of lipids are fatty acids. And then proteins are chains of amino acids. Again, amino acids being the monomers of our polymer proteins. A large chain of amino acids is called a polypeptide. If it folds into a structure, we call it a protein. In nucleic acids, there's 2 basic types of polymers there, DNA and RNA, the monomers being nucleotides, and then, of course, the very important energy-storing ATP nucleotide. All right. We're good? So there's a review.